Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the 001 Radio Games Club. This is the show that we do sometimes, and by sometimes I mean once every 2 to 3 months. One will pop up. Brett you haven't been on this show before. I hope you're ready and excited to talk about.
I'm terrified.
our two titular games, Ace Combat 7 and Project Wingman.
Yes.
One of which you introduced me to, of Project
This is
Wingman,
true.
having not known that game existed until I saw you playing it and immediately needed to play it myself. So, we've been talking about doing this for a long time on the show. Brett and I tend to have slightly different tastes in minigames than some of the other members of the podcast, which means we can talk about some fun things that everyone else gets excluded for.
And not feel bad about it this time because it's just us now. And if you're here, that is because of your own choice.
We aren't forcing Wyatt to listen to us talk about JRPGs again.
Oh.
But this time,
torture.
You know, I guess you could count Ace Combat as a JRPG. Maybe you could swing.
You would be insane, but you could
swing that. So, the two games we're talking about today are Ace Combat 7 and Project Wingman, and the reason we've kind of paired these two is because, well, they're similar in a lot of ways. Project Wingman is very much inspired by Ace Combat, so it makes sense to talk about these two games in the same space. Project Wingman's a whole lot newer than Ace Combat 7 at this point, though. 7's I think 2 years old now. But
yes.
Either way, we're gonna start with the Ace Combat because Ace Combat is a little bit more not necessarily mainstream, but understandable from, I think, a design perspective of the goals they were trying to do and the resources they had. The Ace Combat team is a fair bit larger than Project Wingman's team.
By 20 people, maybe.
But that's a lot
Project
of people.
Wingman's team only being 3, counting the composer.
That is a 23-person team can be pretty big. So
yeah.
All right, Brett. What I want to do, since you are a resident Ace Combat player who's played every Ace Combat game, to my knowledge, that is available to play, in a thing that's achievable to do. Aside from Tom Clancy's Hawks, unfortunately.
Such a shame.
Such a shame.
Haven't gotten to that one yet.
So why don't you introduce us to what Ace Combat is as a franchise? What does Ace Combat do? What is Ace Combat?
So, Ace Combat is a JRPG. Ace Combat is not a JRPG. Ace Combat is it kind of sits genre-wise in a pretty unique spot as far as planes or flight games go, where it's not quite flight sim realism, but it's not quite just arcadey fun stupid time. It's been described to me before I got super into it as just kind of like Metal Gear but in jets, and that's a pretty accurate description. But yeah, gameplay wise, you're looking at kind of a mix between realistic flight models, I guess, and then arcadey things you can do with that flight model. And also very realistic, looking. This Ace Combat 7 is a beautiful looking game.
Oh yeah, the weather effects are phenomenal.
It's especially that 4K image of that JPEG dog.
Absolutely, the JPEG dog.
And yeah, story-wise, that's where the Metal Gear comparisons come in. Past games, which we're probably not going to talk too much about before 7, just for comparison, and that's it. The past games have kind of gotten down pat the themes of similar things to what stuff like Gundam and classic, more mechanically focused Japanese storytelling is about, of just war is bad and the suffering that can comes from it, and a whole lot of bureaucracy and armies playing at things behind the scenes,
and super weapons.
And super weapons, of course, and lots of hallways, always hallways somehow.
Yep. Hey, at least this time we got plane-sized hallways. So
Got plane-sized hallways, yes. And always also, it is called Ace Combat for a reason, because there's always at least one ace rival that you will be fighting against throughout the game.
now, Brett, I need to find the full name of our classic rival this go around. But I think this is a good point to say. Post right now, spoilers are on the table for both of these games.
Yes, yes.
Very heavily. Now, I'll say for these, unlike the Last of Us games club that we did, these are not games that if you know the story, you can't have fun with.
Definitely, yeah.
Or you'll be missing like a super important part of the experience. The stories are great, but they are totally things that you are better able to experience in the game. So I don't think anything we're gonna say here is too heavy of a spoiler that would prevent you from enjoying either game.
Definitely, yeah.
Mostly because like they follow the traditional Japanese storytelling arc of these kind of games. Aside from like Metal Gear, which doesn't tend to do this, of you have big problem, you solve big problem's gone.
It's
world moves on.
It's always like, oh, we're on the back foot in this offensive that the enemy's putting against us, and then you beat them over the course of the game.
Yeah, beat them
that's every
through
single
sheer willpower and plain.
Yeah, sheer amount of missiles fired at one time.
Yep. So, what we've done before on the show is kind of go through beat by beat of the story. I don't think we need to do that here. We can kind of cover broad strokes of things that we liked. So it's probably easiest to get narrative out of the way first, because I think it's the thing we'll have the least to say about, surprisingly.
Yeah.
And I also want to add that we're going to kind of delineate the Ace Combat 7 DLC, which we both played. We'll talk about that after we talk about the base game, because I think it kind of changes some stuff.
It does,
so it's good to talk about those in their own little bubble compared to the base game itself. So
that being said, though, I do want to say, if you are like, if you're someone who's thinking about getting Ace Combat 7, you're like, I don't know if the game's good or not, get a version with the DLC with it on sale, because the DLC is really, really freaking good. It is. So yeah, that's sorry for interrupting.
Oh, don't worry about it. Again, no rules in this show. We do whatever we want.
Anarchy.
So, to set the stage for Ace Combat, this is one of the Strange Reel games. So it takes place in this alternate world called Strange Reel. Classical Japanese storytelling example. It's basically the Gundam Universal Century of Ace Combat. It's where most of the games have taken place, and there's kind of some continuities here, which are fun to talk about. With the different nations and some of the weapons that you find. But the central plot revolves around the Osean Federation and the Kingdom of Erusia. Did I get those correct, Brett? I was concerned that I wouldn't. All right.
You're right. You're also talking to the person that gets Erusia, Usia, and then Osia. Like,
I keep forgetting Usia is in this game.
they all sound the exact same, to the point where unless someone reminds me, I just forget which one that you are fighting for, because they all sound the same, which is a shame. But yeah.
Yeah, so basically there's a war going on. You're fighting on a side at various points. At first you're fighting for, is it Erusia? This is where I get confused. Of the drones.
Okay, I want to make sure that we don't get confused.
Okay, so the Erusia is the one with the drones, right? The story kind of revolves around drone combat and like the ethics of our unmanned aircraft. Good. So Erusia has a bunch of drones and something called an arsenal bird that is a big plane. Big plane. So your central goal, as presented to you at the start, is basically we got to go blow up big plane and blow up the arsenal bird. So
classic.
That's your classic start. Of course, it spirals out of control and gets a little crazier as things go on. We've got a bunch of characters. We've got some behind-the-scenes development problems that led to the story, of course, being like told in a very weird way.
Yeah.
Which is fun to talk about, because there's some really cool stuff here, but I think we can both agree that Ace Combat 7's storytelling methods are maybe not as great as the past games in the franchise.
Definitely, yeah. I think it has. It sucks too, because it has one of the most interesting stories in the whole franchise is just the way that they had to maybe not had to, but the way that it came out basically.
Yeah.
Um, kind of forced it to be told in not the greatest way, but like if because I certainly didn't get it the first time. There's like no shame in just going to like one of the 3 people on YouTube that understand it extremely well to just like analyze it for you essentially, because it is super interesting. It's just,
Yeah.
some of the things you wonder why you're watching a cutscene about.
Yeah,
Straight
and
up,
it's also
unfortunately.
the biggest thing that I think I had an issue with is that you're Trigger. You do
Yes.
ace combat things of being the ace pilot of a bunch of different squadrons. There's a whole bit at the start where like you're accused of accidentally, or not accidentally, you're accused of murdering an important political figure
So
who was
sad.
relevant to the past games. Yeah,
Extremely relevant
which
to the past
I didn't
games.
originally make the connection that that was the same person.
Exactly.
And I was like,
Yeah.
wait, huh?
Like we are in spoilers now, but I'm not gonna just straight up say who it is in case it's still not okay. But like, because Seven was the first Ace Combat game that I played. I just like that happened. I was just like, oh, dude, that's super like screwed up. How could I possibly be framed for this? But then I went back and played the other games and like just kind of like forgot about it, and then played Seven again and realized who that was, and I was just
Yep,
like, this is so painful. And the theme from the previous game plays in sad piano as his VTOL is descending in flames into the ocean, and it's just like, why did this
yep.
happen?
It's one of the moments where this is one of the few Ace Combats that does like have some direct continuity with
Yeah,
other Ace Combats. It's still totally fine to play it without that context.
definitely.
First time I played it, or for the majority of the story, I didn't have any of that context, or at least didn't remember any of it.
Mhm.
But yeah, you do trigger things, and you come up against a Mr. X, the Ace rival for this game, otherwise known as Mihai Dumitru Margareta Cornelio Leopold Blanca Carol Aeon Ignatius Raphael Maria Niketas A. Shilage, or just Mihai for the majority of the game,
Yeah,
uh, who is your ace rival, a old veteran of past wars who's like training the drones. From my
essentially,
understanding of what's
yeah,
going on, his flight data is being used by the classic Belkin man to
yes,
um, create superpowered drones, which are your kind of enemy for the majority of the game. Now, Brett, this is where I run into issues with Ace Combat 7, and I
hmm
think I've
I'm
I've
ready.
mentioned these issues before, and I think
Yes, yeah,
you're gonna understand to a degree of a lot of the fun of Ace Combat games is fighting cool rivals and cool aces and squadrons and fun weird plain banter, radio chatter that we've talked about before on like the narrative episodes of like how effective it is at getting you into the world. There's so much less of that when you're fighting a drone,
yeah.
which is
Um,
unfortunate.
unfortunate, but like it's not like it's one of those things where you have to kind of cut it some slack for it to be as interesting as I think
Yeah.
like it was supposed to be, because they do like the drones do check, like they have radio chatter and it's just like wow or whatever thing, and it legitimately like you are playing a game full of like as realistic as possible jets and stuff, and then you hear like from the wherever atmosphere, you just hear the sound of like a freaking TIE fighter coming in, and it's just like, what what is going on? Um, but that it only really works like for that first like shock. And that being said, like the it makes them unfun characters, because like they're not really characters, they're just they're computers basically. Um, but I think when we go further along, and if we get to talking about like the like bigger messages of the story and stuff, I personally am kind of willing to kind of let that slide for what the drones have to do with like the bigger message of the story, because I think that is really successful. It's just that it's a shame that you don't get the poor plebeian lesser pilots, screaming about how much of a demon you are and giving you all these nicknames. Because Trigger doesn't really get any of those. He gets 3 strikes because he has 3 lines of paint on the back of his plane.
Yeah.
But he doesn't get Demon of the Round Table or anything like that. So
Yeah, nothing
it's
quite
yeah
as fun. And I think that's where a lot of these like behind the scenes production issues kind of came in. It seems like they definitely had plans to handle it a little better, but there was some weird focus on like different allied, quote unquote allied characters, because they don't really do anything
yeah.
at any point. But you've got the princess who just kind of falls into the story at a certain point.
Haha.
Is the best way I can put it. She like literally just falls into the narrative.
That was a good one.
And is just immediately important for some reason. But you're following the story of at the same time, and even the first character you play in the game is the Scrap Queen. So a completely separate character who's not the one you're playing for the majority. That is a mechanic, essentially.
Yeah.
Who gives you the flight tutorial at the very start of the game, but is also like this secondary character we follow for a lot of the story, who's just less interesting. And has that issue of like you don't know why you're supposed to relate to her because she's so abrasive in every
Yeah.
interaction she has. She's just like abrasive as a person, and that's always a risk you run with certain that type of character, of them just being a little bit overbearing with how they act a lot of the time. But I think it went a little far at certain points with what they were going for.
It's yeah, and it sucks too because she has like a similar character. It is kind of done in Ace Combat 5, and they have
Yeah.
like basically what I am about to say. I'm just going to completely not say that, and I'm going to say the shorter version instead. None of those people get in planes, so they don't matter.
Exactly.
Because, like the character I was just about to mention from 5, Pops is the mechanic character. He's the guy that fixes up the planes. You hear him on the comms sometimes, and he's more of like a fathery mentor figure, just because he's like an older dude. And like like his story of like being part of like past wars and stuff doesn't really matter. Like it's interesting, and and it's mattering in the story, but like from a like tunnel vision gameplay perspective, it doesn't matter because he gets in the plane and he helps you in like right in front of your face.
Yeah.
He helps you fly the plane,
Your
which is what
player
the plane
character has interactions with
exactly.
him.
Yes, which, if the games were kind of known for having like visual novelty, like going out and exploring the HQ or whatever sections, then I could see this not being a problem because then you have that
Yeah.
interaction. But it is just cutscenes and playing game.
Because I think
So
it couples with another problem of you flip squadrons a lot in Ace Combat
yes,
7. You go from Mage Squadron to Striker Squadron to whatever the weird panel unit
444, yeah,
444 squadron is, of you're jumping between these different squadrons, and the game has this habit of just either murdering everyone or
yeah,
just making it so you never see these characters again once you're past that squadron. And the game is only, I think, 20
21
missions.
missions, yeah. The
Uh,
last one barely even really being
the
too much
last
of a
one is
mission.
like the second half of a mission,
Yeah,
basically. So you end up like maybe spending 5 missions ish with a lot of these characters before these transition points of different bits. And like the only allied pilot I remember right now is Count, because they say his
of
name a
course,
lot. It's not
of
even that
course.
he was that interesting. It's just they say his name a lot.
Well, and he's funny.
He's funny
He's
too, so he has
legitimately silly.
personality.
Yeah.
And oddly enough, High Roller is the other one that was in like 2 missions and then
Yeah.
vanishes.
So sad for Steve Bloom. Gets absolutely
Yep.
obliterated.
Steve Bloom's there for 2 missions and then just gets
Uh,
obliterated, which is great. But at the same time, there weren't any other standout characters during that part of the game
yeah.
until you run into like Wiseman and Count. After that, you don't really have a lot pulling you along that narrative tether, which is I think what made me bounce off the game the first time I played it, where I got like a third of the way through the game and then just kind of like forgot about it for a while and then came
That
back.
makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that initial third has this weird bit of like going back and forth between different squadrons. It's not super fun.
Yeah. And
Um,
I
yeah.
think I don't even think that's like a pacing issue with like how long or how long you like spend with the characters. It's just like they need to say or do
They
like
need to
more
do more.
memorable. They need to do more things. And honestly, like if the cutscenes like spent more time on the characters you were in the game with than the other characters that you're not, like honestly, if that was the case, then you might not have to change the dialogue in the missions themselves at all, and you could just make them more memorable that way. Because
Yeah,
like I could you could fit a refresher for who the important political figure is that you get framed for your killing like beforehand, and you can fit that in like seamlessly in like a news thing or something that they
yeah,
have focusing on something completely different, and then it makes new people feel bad for it more than they would now. um you could have, because I think your old commander in Mage Squadron has like two lines in the run up to the mission where the tragedy happens, where he's like, "I was always a big fan of this
yeah.
guy. You might
He
not be the guy anymore."
offhandedly explains him.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just like one line. It's like, okay, this is now the 1% of character information that I have for this guy. But if he sat down with Trigger beforehand and was like, you know what that orbital elevator represents to me? This guy had so many things planned for the good of mankind, and now it's being turned into a war thing, and it's so depressing. And I used to like, if you
Yeah,
had just like 2 minutes and 30 seconds of that, I'm in. And the thing is, I know they could do that writing because they've done that writing before
They
in
have
the other games,
in a
which
lot of
it's
many
yeah.
times.
And it's like it's weird because normally the advice is when you're writing something to just not have like characters talking at you, but if you have them talk at you in a good way that is satisfying, it doesn't matter. And that's just how it is in the older games, and they this
Yeah, show don't
time
tell isn't a
constraints or
universal
something.
rule. A lot of people will
Yeah,
treat it
yeah,
like a universal rule, but there are many pieces of media that can break it if you just write well enough that it doesn't matter.
exactly, exactly.
Or deliver that exposition in a way that is entertaining. Like the radio chatter is people just talking at you, but
Yeah,
it's great. It's great. Both Project Wingman and Ace Combat 7 have fantastic radio chatter for the majority of the game. Um, so it's stuff like that is just wonderful. But I think this is probably a good point to start transitioning to the greater themes, because we can talk about a lot of the different characters and whatnot. Uh, but most of them are pretty one note. You have your classic, the gambler. You've got Count, who's your rival, and his personality is literally that he is your rival. Yeah,
it's kind of funny. He
nothing
keeps lying
else.
about the kill count, and like I love how it's like you've killed like 45 things. You've just
Yep.
blown to bits in this mission so far. And he's just like, "Yeah, you have two. Well, I have six." And it's just like, "You're adorable, you little idiot."
I love that people also where the radio chatter gets great is like sometimes the other people in the mission will comment about how off he is.
It's what the
Nothing's
hell
going
is
on.
wrong with you? Trigger's done everything so far.
Yeah. Which is great. I love when they kind of acknowledge how well you're doing in missions with stuff like
Yeah,
that. Of like partway through you'll learn, oh, someone's saying we're running out of time. Trigger, you need to pick it up if you're like
yeah.
not doing the objective fast enough. So there's a lot of cool bits like that that kind of help you along your mission curve of knowing what to do.
Yeah, when
Uh,
we get to talking about the DLC, there's a special moment that
oh
I'd like
yeah.
to highlight.
But we mentioned the orbital elevator, which
Yes.
becomes a central motif for the second half ish of
Yeah, more so the
the
second
plot.
half.
And Brett, I want to let you talk about the greater themes first before I get into my
Okay.
bit, because I have some issues with the space elevator
Okay.
specifically.
Okay.
But I wanna have your unfiltered opinion on those greater issues first and the greater
Yeah.
point of the plot.
So, and we're gonna have to do another mini one of these for the DLC, because the
Oh
DLC
yeah,
adds one. Um, but the what this basically every Ace Combat game has the thing that it's about besides the planes, and this one's thing is about drones, which is the very like modern military thing in real life. Is like, are they? It's not even just like, are they is it a moral thing to do? Is it ethical to produce just like computerized killing machines, basically, that someone can just literally control from like an outpost with like an Xbox 360 controller or something? It's like that isn't even what it's about, which makes it pretty unique with handling drones. It's about like replacing the people that like the
Love
people and
flying.
yeah, the people, and I think more importantly, the characters that love flying,
Yeah.
because like in this world in which like drones are being forwarded to be like the future of air combat, um, you don't have any of the heroic characters in any of the past games. Um, and so what it ends up being towards the end is that even the guy who made the drones is like, this has gone way too far. This is like victory right now is that wasn't worth it for what I have done. And now this orbital elevator is of course the tallest thing on the planet because it has to be, and acts as the biggest broadcast tower that these drones now are defending, like the hub that they're supposed to be defending because they're programmed to. But they're on a kill code to destroy absolutely everything that will spread possibly across the entire planet if we let them download it into the orbital elevator at the end of the game, basically.
Yeah,
And
because
so now you
basically
have
what we kind of learn is that there's a bunch of inactive drone factories
yes,
that, if that signal gets out, will basically mass create corrupted drones that will kind of just attack things.
it's yeah, and it'll basically be a horrible Terminator-esque singularity, but
Yeah.
with planes this time. And it results in a pretty I like one of the highlights of the base game for me is just seeing all the like what remains of all the planet's militaries like coming together at the end for
Yeah.
like one last fight against these thoughtless computers, and kind of seeing that like downfall of what it means to essentially be a modern military. Like you don't get the easy IFF anymore because all the satellites are gone because some idiot had the idea to shoot one and
Yep.
accidentally blew all of them up. Um,
I
so
want to
it's
like
just
address that specifically. That's one of the really cool ways that the
is
game tells the story through gameplay of like, you
yeah,
can't rely on your targeting system now because it doesn't know who's an ally or an enemy. You can target them, but if you shoot without confirming visually that they are an enemy or an ally, you might just blow up your friend.
Yeah,
And it's
and that's
great.
another thing the radio chatter does is that they will scream in pain and
Yup.
agony if you destroy a friendly thing. And if you wait long enough in the mission that that focuses on this, like some of the things that would normally be enemies, if you let the politician that you're escorting like talk enough, he can change their side, and they'll switch sides to what they would have been if you just blew them up immediately or didn't wait long enough. Um, uh, I forgot exactly where I was, but it's yeah. Essentially, the end of the game, the end message is uh, sometimes, contrary to Iron Man 2's beliefs, drone is not better.
Yep.
Um, and compared to these like heroic characters, they are just like killing machines, and it's a pretty interesting take on the like classic like Terminator, like I said before, kind of singularity thing of AIs becoming like self-aware. But that being said, of course, there's some issues with it that you will mention right now.
Yeah. So I don't have that many issues with the drone plotline. I think the drone plotline is pretty well done in the sense that it gets the core ideas across. It obviously feels a little bit rushed in
Yeah,
that there are two distinct towards the end of the game. They try to tell two different stories. There's like a set of two missions where they kind of divert from what your thought process would have been into that point, for the princess and the Belkin man to be like, we gotta blow up the tower now.
yeah,
But the blowing up the tower, they don't centralize on the fact that it's like the drone communication array and blowing it up would solve that issue. They center on the fact that it like represents, of debating whether or not it represents human hope.
yeah.
And it's really weird. It
It's
gets,
because
go
that's
ahead.
the thing. If they gave it more time, both in real life, well, like
Yeah.
I don't, it didn't need more time, but smoother amount of time. um, in real life and more time in the story, like those kind of like admittedly heavy-handed messages and lines are pretty common for the rest of the series, but like that just
They're
coming out.
usually handled a little bit better.
Exactly, exactly. It's weird the way they do it in this game.
Well, it's like when Solid Snake in a Metal Gear game gives a lecture on the evils of nuclear warfare, and it is super heavy-handed, but because it's been set up so much, and that usually it's a very well-written bit of exposition, it makes it a lot more tolerable. But here it's literally like the princess flip-flops 3 or 4 times
Yeah,
within the span of 2 cutscenes that are
yeah,
back to back, and it's like she's going like, but this political man that died earlier was like, this is the sign of hope for all humanity, but at the same time it's a sign of oppression for all humanity because it's so tall. It's like literally what happens. It lost me at that point. I was like,
because it's so tall.
and then apparently, like, what they figure out, the reason she starts to believe it's hope again is that this mural that was drawn of the space
Yeah,
elevator has drawings of like 6 of them and not just one. So she was like, oh, they were gonna build many because they would have all
yeah.
furthered humanity. What?
And it's like these things, if you have them set up and delivered correctly, they would all be awesome. It's
Yeah, this
just the
could be a
manner in
great.
which, yeah, the manner in which they are said is just a little lackluster. And you get the message from it, again, from analyzing it, but you don't get like the immediate understanding of like, oh, I understand this.
Yeah.
And now I'm thinking about it while I am blowing up the enemy drones.
Because like I loved it when they do for a brief while start to like go into, but if we blow up this tower, we're now like stranding people that are up there. Like we
Yeah.
are sentencing them to death, and I'm like, yeah. This is, if you do that, you can't get up to your like essentially the International Space Station in this world because you've blown up the elevator.
Yeah. Or at the end of the game, you can't get up to the people that you sent out for a deep space mission.
That you learn about when you need to go get them.
At the well, I even like beyond of that, you just learn about them in like the last 2 minutes of the game,
Exactly. You learn they
which
exist in the same minute you learn they're back.
which is a cool thing, but maybe you should have mentioned that like 3 missions before, and then revealed the person that was up there as the end credit thing, and then people be like, oh, well, I cared so much about that before, and now that I know it's the character from a previous game, now I'm glad that I did that.
It just yeah, it's there's so many cool elements that definitely could be handled better
Yeah,
because like we've seen things that handle them better. Gundam has a lot of like space elevator
a
stories
lot of
specifically that are pretty well handled. This one was all the core bits were there, but they were missing that connective thread that kind of
exactly.
drives it home. But yeah, all the gameplay just starts to escalate at that point, which is great.
I think that makes up for it a little bit at least.
Yeah, so I think we've kind of covered most of our thoughts on the main story, unless you have anything else you want to say about it, Brett.
Um, and this kind of goes for gameplay too, so I guess it functions as a little bit of a segue. But there's like some of the most like appreciative and stylish fan service for any like game series ever. Like they definitely know that they're just
Oh
like
yeah,
maybe like a room full of people across the entire planet that plays these games, and so they like the people that play them like really cherish the parts that are like big. So you defend a big super fortress that you attacked in the previous game, and it happens on the same date, but it's the reverse mission this time. Mihai trained supposedly the ace from Ace Combat 4 that was like really hard, so that like helps like push him up higher. And those parts of the storyline, like of all the things to like not like stumble over themselves, like none of the fan service does, and I think that's pretty cool, because that's
yeah.
when fan service is unsuccessful, that in my opinion is like one of the most annoying
Because it usually
things
that
ever.
shows the creators are misunderstanding what people like about their thing,
Exactly,
and I
yeah,
think this shows that the Ace Combat team knows exactly why people like Ace Combat,
exactly,
which
yeah.
is very good to see, especially considering there was like a 8-ish year gap between
It's Yeah.
even the announcement of 7 and Ace Combat 6. So
Yeah.
because they basically skipped PS4 and
Pretty
Xbox One.
much. And they just had a lot of lackluster,
Yeah.
like bad games in
The
between
bad
6 and
spin-offs.
7.
There was Tom Clancy's Hawks, which I would contribute as maybe having slightly killed the genre.
A little bit.
A little bit.
But now, I think 4 was the game that had previously sold the most back on the
Yeah.
PS2, and 7 has now beaten that, and sales keep going up because it keeps going on sale, so more people are going to play, and it's on more platforms than ever. So hopefully, like just talking about how they demonstrated the fact that they
Yeah.
know what games they make, like hopefully they can, Namco gives them like more time and better resources to make the next one like as good as they want it to
And
be.
it's also
More
super
people.
clear, like this
Oh
engine
yeah.
is incredibly well made.
Oh yeah.
So they can.
Totally.
This is one of those situations where like I would be very surprised if they don't come out with another Ace Combat in the same engine, because like
Definitely.
there aren't that many improvements they can make to like the cloud volumetrics in this, because they look so realistic
Yeah.
that you see them and
It
you're
is
like,
wild.
what could they change? I'm not gonna notice unless I'm like actually a pilot. It's close enough.
Exactly. Yeah.
It works great, looks great.
No bugs at all. It's crazy.
That's the wild thing. Like Ace Combat 7
Yeah.
has so few technical issues, which like coming into this era of video games is the thing that everything has.
It's amazing.
You would think that a game working would be, pretty high on the priority list, but at this point it's more get it out there. If people buy it, it'll work at some point, maybe.
Yeah, and then you can release the patch notes as a light novel for however
Yes.
much a small novella costs at Barnes and Noble. How long they are.
Wonderful.
Ugh.
But yeah, so I want to talk a bit about gameplay.
Gameplay, yeah.
So I have some positives and negatives for Ace Combat 7. I think the one thing I want to say very loudly, and this we haven't talked about Wingman yet. We'll get to that at some point. But the big thing with both of them is I think after having played both, they definitely exist as separate things, trying to do different things.
Definitely.
Which is hard to tell from the outset. So if you go into Ace Combat 7 expecting it to be just an arcadey shooting plane game, you will probably be disappointed. Yeah. Ace Combat 7 has a lot of like varied missions and a lot of like mission structure things that will make you do things in certain ways, and it's almost more like a puzzle to solve with your plane loadout and everything.
That's a good way to describe it, yeah.
Yeah, so, and I think that will appeal to a lot of people, and specifically like Ace Combat fans. I think that's what they want. So I love it, but it does mean there's a few things I think are lacking. Like the big thing that stood out to me is that Ace Combat 7 does not have a mission where it is just like you against a bunch of planes, aside from like the first mission.
It's and then the DLC.
And then the DLC, yeah. But there's very few points where like a lot of the fun anti-plane weapons you just don't have a reason to use, because you're limited in that like you have one special slot. So you're probably going to want to take the weapon you find most fun, which is like maybe a railgun, maybe the bombs to make it easier on the missions that you have to destroy a bunch of ground targets. You're going to take one of those because that's like obviously more useful in the case you're doing. And the game is hard to the point where like if you're not
very hard,
if you aren't speccing your plane right, you're not going to be able to complete the mission. So,
exactly, yeah.
I think that does hurt it in some minor cases of like it would have been really cool to have like a showdown of some type at the like 2/3 point of the game. There was just not anything that really filled that need,
which is crazy, because it's almost like they did that in every game that came before.
Exactly. Like that's one of the few things that I go through and I'm like, this is just one thing that I want one more plane fight.
Exactly. And like it's kind of like a staple for like what people call the big three, like the golden era, which is 4, 5, and 0 on the PS2. Like they all have like halfway-ish, 1/3, 2/3 point. There's always the mission that just puts you like right after like a big battle that you just proved that you are the big badass guy. It just puts you in a school of other lesser planes, and the electric guitar is screaming, and it's just 20 minutes of kill as many as you can before the time runs out. and that's pretty much it. And like you said, that is like super satisfying, almost like palate cleanser where it's
Yeah,
placed, kind of just like there's no objective here except just like to have fun, essentially.
especially because
Um,
there's like a sequence of missions where you do a lot of like lengthy, almost platforming in a plane,
yeah, yeah,
and after a certain point, it becomes a little bit less unique when you've done it 3 times in a row.
hmm
So putting that palette cleanser there, I think, really would have helped the pacing just a little bit.
definitely, yeah.
Especially because those missions are like those are the easiest mission to make when you're designing them because it is sky, planes. That's it.
Yeah, exactly. The hardest thing is to make the soundtrack for that mission, but
Which
like
is maybe why I think they didn't do it. I almost think they
maybe.
didn't make one of those because they were like, this seems like it might be low effort or it might not
Mm,
be up to the like quality level of the rest of the game because everything else has a lot of varied mission objectives. I'm like, I still wish you would have done it.
yeah, I get that, and it does make sense. I actually didn't think of that. That they would just be like, we people have waited so long for this to come out. We can't just like have a normal mission.
That's
That's not
yeah.
good
I
enough.
legitimately think that would be why is like they looked at their mission structure and were like, okay, everything else is so unique and high quality. We can't have a mission that's lowering the quality bar. I don't
Yeah,
think it would have been received that way. I think it would have been received as like the unique mission, just a palate cleanser mission.
totally.
Um,
Yeah,
it's the classic like when you're playing Halo and you get that one mission and you drop in and there's just a wave of grunts. It's
exactly.
not challenging, but it's really fun
It's yeah,
to
that's
just
the one that you go back
destroy the
to with the
grunts.
birthday party skull, and then you run along the
Exactly.
screen. Yeah.
That's like my only real gameplay complaint about 7 though. And I think that's the impressive thing is
Yeah,
that
for sure.
so much of 7 is so solid. Like
Yeah.
everything is just working, which is phenomenal. Especially cuz we don't have any other games in this type of game aside from Project Wingman, but like when 7 released that wasn't out. So
Exactly. Yeah.
there was no other plane game that was not a flight simulator.
But Tom Clancy's Hawks.
Tom Clancy's Hawks, Brett.
But what if?
What if Tom Clancy's Hawks 3 is actually Project Wingman?
Oh my god. Ugh.
Yeah.
No, thank you. Um, but yeah, gameplay is like it's one of like I played Ace Combat 7 first at Anime Next. They just had it on like a public PS4, and it was like all in Japanese too because it was just a Japanese PS4. And I was like, man, this is really hard and I don't get it, and it kind of sucks cuz I don't care that much
Yep.
about learning it. But once you get over that, like the learning hump, um my friend who got me into these games kind of explained it the best, I think, when he was like, right now, like you are spinning and floundering around, like just because you don't know how to, stay off from smashing into the ground because you're always traveling forward because
Yep.
there's gravity. um in time you will just be doing that to look cool, even though no one is watching.
Yep.
And
It's just
it is
you.
true. Exactly, it is true. You do the thing where you just go within like a foot of the ground and then like pull back up and do like a
Dude,
post stall
favorite thing
maneuver,
is you
railgun.
turn sideways so the very tip of your wing is skimming the edge of a water.
Yeah,
And once you can pull that
exactly,
off and not crash, you've done it. You're an Ace Combat
exactly,
player
yeah,
now.
exactly.
But the way I like to think about it is like people will say that Ace Combat has a difficult control scheme. Also, Ace Combat 7 has 2 control schemes: standard and expert. Expert is the control scheme that every other Ace Combat game has, and that
Yes.
any other flight sim game has. Standard is the baby I don't want to fly the plane control scheme.
Gotta fly the plane! You're not a baby anymore! Fly the plane!
And I think the reason people look at that and it might bounce off of Ace Combat 7 is because if you try the standard control scheme, the game's not very interesting.
No.
It just there's not much challenge, doesn't really work anymore. I think what you really need to do is like think of it as if you are playing a type of game you've never played before. Imagine sitting
Exactly.
down as little baby boy playing some GoldenEye on the N64 for the first time, having no clue what the sticks do, what the single stick does, how you're supposed to move. You're just being presented with a new control scheme. It's going to take some time to learn, but like
Yeah.
it is far harder for someone who hasn't played video games to try and grasp standard third-person controls, because there is
Yeah.
no real-world analog for standard third-person controls of like nothing you do in life with your actual self is going to match what you do with a controller to move in a third-person game. Whereas Ace Combat 7 relatively mimics what Plane Flight is
As best as you
as
can
best
on
as
a
you
regular
can with a
controller.
controller.
Yeah.
So I think it is just you just got to get past the learning curve.
Yeah.
And it's not a
It's
scenario of like it's particularly hard like Dark Souls or something. It's just like it's a different control scheme. You got to get used to it.
yeah, and then of course, like when you get like higher and higher in the difficulties, because there are difficulties in a
Yep.
lot of them. Like yeah, it gets really hard, but um, like it's almost as if you're not controlling a person, but a vehicle that has to be controlled in a different way than a person.
Yep.
Um, so yeah, but that again, like once you get past that learning hump at the beginning, like it's so rewarding, and I like let me know if you agree with me or not. But they're like there are very few besides Project Wingman games that like give you the same feeling of just styling on a bunch of a bunch of other planes
The
and you
only
just look
other like
so
games
cool
that
doing
nail
it.
it so much are character action games like Devil May Cry, because that is what this is.
Yeah,
Like
pretty
Ace
much.
Combat 7 is the closest genre that I would compare it to, if not like flight arcade games, is character action or spectacle fighters like Devil May Cry and Bayonetta, because that's what it's about, is looking cool
That
while
makes
doing
sense.
stuff.
Yeah.
We haven't even talked about the hallway you fly your plane through.
Yeah, of course.
uh,
The obligatory hallway.
which is always such a great cap on an
Yeah.
Ace Combat experience. The final boss is never actually a boss. It's you gotta
Yeah.
go fly through something, and in this one, it's you fly through a hallway chasing a drone. Then you gotta kill a drone in this like tiny box,
Circle. Oh god.
circular like oval that you're in. That like you have to constantly be looking out because gravity will crash you if you're not careful.
It's yeah.
It's wonderful
It's amazing. I think it is like it might not be my favorite, but it is my best. Like it
because
is
it's
probably
relatively
the
short.
best.
It
Yeah, very
is
short,
shorter
very
than
hard.
average ones. It's very difficult.
Yeah,
They're nice. They put a checkpoint right before you go in,
very kind of them.
which is very
'Cause-
kind. So you don't have to do the boss fight
ugh.
again. That was before it. And then you shoot through a space elevator
Oh yeah, and
to
of course
escape.
you got to dodge the elevator cars on your way up, and you're
Yep,
going straight up, so your plane wants to tip either way because it's
just
real
gravity.
life apparently. Yeah,
And there's wind physics, of course. So if it's
of
windy, your
course.
plane will like start to blow to the side. Uh,
Yep,
which is just really a fun thing to show that you can do it. Like
it's so
that's
cool.
because the moment you realize when you hit that point and you're like, I can do this. I know enough about the game to get through flying this a space that is maybe like 5 feet on either side of your plane. Like there is very little leeway here.
It's yeah. Like you can beat like 1 degree of turning off, and like one of your wings just barely clips the side wall of this highway that can maybe fit like 2 cars, and then there's the circle around it. Like you just
Yep.
20 times in a row, you become a ball of flame before you learn how to how to do that right.
Yeah, but
And it feels
once
awesome
you
when you do
nail
it.
that, the sense of satisfaction is really really good.
Oh yeah,
Um, and I think that's like one of the best parts of the game is like you realize once you hit the end of Ace Combat 7, you realize you can fly the planes pretty well.
yeah,
Um, and yeah, I think it just does a great job at like over the course of the game leading you into the control scheme enough to where you can fly the plane through that space elevator without crashing
definitely.
it.
Yeah,
Uh, though I am
and
curious, I kind of want to try doing that with standard controls because I think it might be harder.
it's honestly yeah, because like you have to be so precise, and I
You have
just
to
feel like you wouldn't
angle
be able to make
like to
yeah.
specific angles. I wonder what the solution to that is. I haven't tried it.
Just switch, get good, do the better controls instead. That's the only way.
And yeah,
I
so go ahead.
I was gonna say one last thing about gameplay, unless you had another thing. Was like I there have been few games that I just like beat them, and then I immediately want to like start over and play them
Yeah.
through the whole way again now that I know how to do it better. But like, and this goes for every like Wingman, Ace Combat, the whole like franchise, pretty much. At least the ones that are on like the non portable consoles. Like this, I don't know how they do it. It's just it. the most replayable like games I think I've probably ever played. Like I have
Yeah.
so many hours into that game, just like especially for trying to get like all the S ranks because that's how you get all the plane skins and stuff that look really cool, and it carries on the same way into 7. I just haven't gotten around to it yet, but it's crazy for a game that barely has multiplayer in it to just have you go back through it the whole like over and over again.
Yeah, again,
Basically,
that's something they've lifted straight off of Devil May Cry. It's the kind of progression where your progression is playing the same missions over and over again because they're fun. Like the
exactly.
game
Yeah.
is fun enough to play. Because like you can beat Ace Combat 7 if you're playing on a lower difficulty or you're really good at flight games. You could beat it in a day probably,
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah. You
two,
can.
uh, if you're taking it at a regular pace. So they're not ludicrously hard, and they aren't that long. These missions are typically time locked to 20 to 30 minutes at the most.
Yeah.
So it's not super long, but that's fine because there's so much to do. You have an entire skill tree essentially of planes and weapons and
Oh yeah.
parts to like customize how you want your plane to behave. So there's tons of stuff that you can like unlock and like ways to eventually get the plane of the final boss and like go crazy with it.
Of course.
But of course you got to get through like the entire skill tree before you do that. So
Exactly. And it costs like $1 million just to buy that one
oh,
plane.
2
So,
million. 2 million.
oh, is it 2
It's 2
million? Oh my
million.
god, I forgot.
Uh
Jeez.
so yeah, there's a lot of incentive for you to replay things. And you eventually get all those sweet planes with all
Feels so
the
good.
great special weapons. So yeah, that's I think most of the gameplay stuff. The only other thing I want to say about Ace Combat 7 specifically is the way they tend to work in combat is you've got your plane with your gun, your missile, and a special weapon of some variation that is like a powerful weapon that has a specific use. So like it might be a railgun to help you pinpoint target things and just obliterate them.
So
Um,
satisfying.
it might be a bunch of anti-air like swarm missiles. It might be anti-ground missiles. It might be a giant bomb to blow up ships or something. Uh, and then you've got your standard missiles, which are generally used for everything, and then your machine gun or your pulse laser, depending on the plane. Uh, the machine guns in this one are a little bit piddly.
A little bit wimpy, little pea shooters.
It's kind of
Strapped to the
a side
side.
effect of the more realistic model, I think. I think they
Mhm.
kind of overcorrected from past games of the machine guns are now very difficult to use.
Yeah, they're pretty hard.
And a lot of that is due to like the fact that this flight model is far more realistic than the other games. Like you have wind affecting the nose of your plane, so your machine gun reticle is going all over the place in kind of unpredictable ways. And you also have like a very restricted range on it
Yeah.
for what you can use, and it doesn't do that much damage.
No, it
Um,
doesn't.
which is kind of a shame because it's fun to use, but it's not great.
Yeah. It does the little like stun thing that we talked about before where it makes the plane that you hit with it be like, "Whoa, what?" and like stop like dodging basically so you can get easier missile
Yeah,
shots on it. But at the same time, like
you
I'm
can't
just
really do a gun only run as easily.
exactly. Yeah, and it's like this thing is making the sound of a goddamn lawnmower with how fast it's shooting bullets out, and it takes like 5 seconds of holding the
You have
reticle
to
on
have like a
something for it to
solid two
explode.
seconds of uninterrupted fire at something that
It's
is
yeah,
all hitting to blow it up, and I'm like, this is,
yeah.
and that is very difficult to achieve in this kind of game. So that's my like one downside, but the rest of it is great.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I do think after having played Wingman, I'm converted to the multiple special weapons train now permanently. It's going to be hard to go
Oh
back
yeah.
when Ace Combat 8 inevitably happens, hopefully. Uh,
Please,
please give us more.
please.
But yeah, it would be hard to go back to the single special weapons because there's definitely some missions where you'll end up fighting. The first half will be ground targets. The second half will be like a couple of planes or some like naval targets. And the
Yeah,
mission or the special weapon you have is not necessarily going to be as useful
yeah.
if you don't expect that. So it's a little bit difficult on the first run through if you pick your anti-ship missiles and then find out you're going to be fighting a bunch of planes.
It's yeah. Or if you pick your A10 Warthog that goes a maximum of like 800 whatevers per
Yeah.
hour, and then you're fighting super planes that just appear at the end of the
Yep,
mission
I've
that
done
can
that a
do like
bunch.
PSMs and are like firing railguns at you and stuff. It's like, you didn't tell me about this in the briefing that I watched 3 times to make sure I got all of.
Well, because that's the other thing is like you have to pay attention to the dialogue going on because they will tell you specifically what you're fighting, and even in mission, they will tell you like what you're doing. So you might hear someone on radio chatter be like, "People are coming. They're coming from the side. They're gonna get you." And you'll have to be, if you don't pay attention to what they're saying, you'll just get slammed by a bunch of planes from the back end. Or if you're defending a target, they'll be like, "Oh, there's a missile launcher in this area that you got to find by visual only. It's not on the radar. So you got to go do that. And if you don't, you're gonna lose the mission."
Yeah, because it'll just be.
And the game won't tell you why, because you should be listening to reading the subtitles or listening to the radio chatter. You got to do it.
Exactly, yeah. And I think that's a good thing because it feels cool. It just like to get it feels like you're listening to a real like military briefing, and then you do the thing right and it's like, "Whoa, I listened and it worked." That's crazy. Learning comprehension.
Oh, it feels great once you realize that the game is actually functioning with that expectation of like you actually doing things that would be expected of you if you were a pilot in these, like actually having to listen to orders and whatnot. Because if you don't, you're probably going to fail the mission.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is fun. But yeah, I think we can move on to the DLC now, Brett.
Yes, which should be way shorter because it's only 3 missions.
Yeah, the gameplay is the same for the most part, aside from some really cool mission structure things.
And it's worth pointing out, like, it was released in 3 separate episodes, but we just had the benefit of being able to play them all in a row, even when I got them, like, I don't remember when. But I think it's worth pointing out, just like saying, like I did in the beginning, like, this DLC is super worth it. These are like the 3 best missions in the game. Especially, my favorite one is the first one where it is like finally you get the you versus a million planes mission.
Yep.
Finally it's and the music is amazing. Like, of course it's beautiful and it feels great, and you have two things going on here that I feel like are self-referential enough that I think they're pretty funny. Is like you're flying and there's like 5 planes including you against just like 60 or more just jets that are coming right at you, and like all of the comm chatter is just filled above those enemies being like, "Finally, we get to fight real people instead of all these damn robots all the
great.
time."
It's self-aware.
It's amazing. Finally, it's like it's one line away from being finally Ace Combat 7. Like,
Ace Combat's happening.
Exactly, yeah. And then they also have like they have things that try to break up the you versus a million planes.
Yeah.
And you just slap them away. It's amazing. You just slap them away and you get back to destroying a million planes. Like, the game knew exactly what you wanted to do, and it just let you just get out of here. Let me.
And I also love that, like, the DLC takes place during the main campaign at like kind of an undetermined point. It's between a few missions with a certain squadron, which is great because you get a lot more characterization in these 3 missions for like the 4 people in the squadron for count. Wiseman, I think it's Hujin,
and Lanza is the other guy.
Yeah, Lanza just kind of goes away though. He doesn't talk much. So
because he gets injured, I think, so he's not there for the first one, I think.
Oh yeah.
I forget, and then
Hujin also gets injured at a certain point and is out for a while. But you get a lot more party banter in this one, like of them kind of playing off of each other and having some fun back and forth, and like doing the kill count and whatnot, and people reacting to like Trigger going insane and like murdering 50 planes.
And I think like someone even is like, how can you hear what the hell they're saying? And it's like, oh, I just have a radio tape to the side of my console. You guys don't do that? And they're like, what are you talking about? And that literally explains why you can hear the enemy comms throughout the entire series in just one line. It's cute. It's awesome. I love it.
Well, it's great because it's also simple. It's like, you could just tape a radio to your thing and it would work.
Stop asking. It's fine.
It's a great little side explanation for what's going on.
Yeah.
And I also love we get characterization for your AWACS for Longcaster. Of
Yes.
like, there's a bit where he's talking
Yes.
about food and he's like having lunch while
Hmm.
doing all this, which is just fun character moments. Because the other issue with like the main campaign, you bounce back and forth between your AWACS, and if you don't know plain lingo, AWACS is basically your handler, your like operator
Yeah.
that's kind of directing the mission, generally from like a non-combat vehicle of some type. So it'll be like in
Way
the
high
big
up in
jet
the
engine
atmosphere.
or the helicopter super high up that's just kind of
Yeah.
overseeing everything. Uh, so you get a lot of banter with that because the main campaign just kind of like bounces you back and forth between a bunch,
Hmm.
and only like two of them are interesting. The other two are just
Yeah.
like super boring and go away almost immediately. Uh, but Longcaster is fun. We get some cool Longcaster bits here. And then Brett, they fixed the
Yes.
problem. You fight rival aces.
That's crazy. I was gonna say the villains in just these three missions are like some of the most like mechanically and narratively interesting like of the whole series. I think I'm pretty partial to them
Yeah,
because the dual aces you fight, two crazy um mimic squadron, it's their boss fight in the second mission, and like the little tease you get in the first one is like fun, but that boss fight in the second mission is like balls to the walls insanity, probably the most difficult ace fight in the whole shebang.
yeah. They start
Just
going crazy.
mechanically, it's yeah, and like the music blasting in the background is like free jazz that is just absolutely
It
insane and
feels straight out
perfect.
of like Gundam Thunderbolt, which
It
is
does, yeah.
the best thing to say about a boss fight.
Definitely, yeah. And also it's worth pointing out because we haven't really mentioned the overarching music yet. That I
Oh,
think some of the best music
phenomenal.
in games, like just in general, it is
Every Ace Combat
incredible.
game has incredible music, and that has
Yeah,
not changed at all. Every
yeah,
every
it's
sound, every song here is great.
yeah, it's only gotten better, I think, through the years. Like it's just it's amazing. Um, and of course the DLC has all new tracks. But the other villain, the more main villain, is is he captain or admiral? I don't know.
It's
He's
Captain
insane.
Matias Torres.
Captain Matthias Torres, baby. Crisp white sheets. Absolute like they've made you fight some crazy people in
I'm
this
gonna
little
kill
plain
10
game.
million people with my own hands, or kill a million people with my own hands. Save 10 million.
Save 10
Uh,
million at the cost of a million, which is any sane person would think that that's fine, of
and he's also
course.
wrong. They point out he's completely wrong at a certain point. This man's
Yeah.
weird plan is to nuke a city to like cause. Basically, he's. I think the setup they've gone for is that he's kind of been. He was a war hero for his nation, and they're
Yes.
now kind of like they don't have a use for him, so they're making him into a villain.
Well, because it's different than that. It's I think more interesting. Because another little bit of fan service is that he is a war hero from uh, it's like the
Yeah,
ground version of You vs. a Million Planes. In Ace Combat 4, where you completely obliterate Erusea, the invincible fleet of the enemy, and
yeah,
just like
Aruja.
one of the ships that has a name on it, he's the captain of one of them. And so the reason he's a war hero is because he
He's
saved
like the only survivor and saved his entire ship.
he saved at least the majority of his crew. So like all of the crew that is with him is still with him to this day because they're super loyal to him.
Yeah,
And they were
which is a great
in that.
setup.
Yes, like that like loyal crew mentality is super interesting to me. And it goes to like 11 here because I think what you missed, Ryan, the
Well, so
submarine that
I
he is
want to
in.
say it's not what I'm talking about is just like the Erusian plan for him, not
Okay,
like the
yeah, yeah, yeah,
greater
yeah,
story of
yeah.
like they explain at
Okay.
one point because you have the question of like, well, why this man has been set up as like a hero, so why is he doing this thing that's like ostensibly bad?
Mhm.
It's because there's some offhanded exposition that's like the Erusian military has kind of lied to him and told him some things that have led him to this path that
It's
aren't
and
necessarily
also
true.
it's also the fact that he was trapped in the
Yeah,
submarine, the Alicorn, that you're fighting with his whole already loyal crew for like an extremely long amount of
Like
time at
2
the
full
bottom of the ocean.
years.
So he is completely off his rocker, and
Which is
they
great.
also it's amazing, because his voice actor sounds like he is too, and it's awesome. And they like insinuate that like over like the time between like them getting the submarine finally after 2 years out of the water to like the point where you fight it, like members of his crew have like risen through the ranks and have like gotten to higher positions in like
Yep.
the military to like make this possible. And it's wild. Like that is super interesting to me. And of course he hijacks this submarine that who would know it better than he does, um that is capable of it's basically an aquatic Metal Gear,
Exactly. Yeah, it is
with
a Metal Gear.
yeah, with a remote controlled nuke firing railgun.
Yeah, this isn't a nuke launcher. This is a nuke railgun
Yes,
specifically.
that is guided by drones.
Yep.
That is how the terminal guidance is decided. And he's just gonna blow stuff up with it because he has his own values now. He has his own way to stop the war, and that's of course to kill a million people, to
Yeah,
save
he's
10 million
specifically
people.
sent to like blow up the Yuuzhan capital. Like he's gonna launch a nuke into the heart of the capital and just make it explode.
Yes.
Which
Yeah.
their solution is that like it'll be such a war atrocity that people will never use nuclear weapons again.
Yeah. But then he's just like, but then what if I just kept doing it?
He's
And then
like,
they
what
just
if I keep
realize,
going.
oh no, what
He's
have we
insane.
done?
Yeah, it's great because it's like it's very time limited too. Like you have a lot of incentive to be doing this because you know that if you fail, they're gonna launch a nuke at a giant capital, which has far more than 1 million people in it. I think they say at one point they're like, his calculations are extremely off. He's gonna kill like 5 million people per shot of this gun. So yeah, he is off his rocker, mad. And the series of missions kind of like revolves around you first finding out about the Alicorn super weapon submarine and Torres who's piloting it, and then you go on like some raids, try to hunt it down, and then you find out more. There's this weird other dude that like has an AI. Do you remember AI Man?
I don't remember. Oh, the
David
yes,
North,
yeah,
I think his name is.
yeah.
That bit is the bit that kind of got lost
line.
on me. He's like he's Quizman.
Yes. It's like, so what's the answer to this? It is the way he starts like
he's
every
constantly
single, like,
prompting
briefing.
people for answers.
It's and even the characters think it's annoying, which is funny.
That's the only bit which fell flat on me because there's a whole. I think something was lost in translation here. I don't think it was necessarily that it's not a well written bit, but there's this whole bit after the end of the first mission where he's like, there's like chessboard visuals and he's going back and forth with this AI about like, well, how are we gonna stop Torres? Like, what's his plan? What's he gonna do? And then the AI and him just have a debate over logic versus. They don't use emotion as the phrase; they use sensuality.
Yep, they do.
And he's like, "No, Alex AI, you got to think about it in terms of sensuality." It doesn't make any sense.
I am a robot. I don't understand what the hell you're talking about.
And like they then start referring to both Torres and Three Stripes as the singularity.
Yeah.
I love that bit. That bit's great, but it makes no sense. Nothing. Nothing those two characters say makes any sense whatsoever, and it's great.
It's too big brain for us. We just.
I legitimately think a lot of that was lost in translation. Of like they made these cutscenes to look cool in Japanese, with a bunch of like big English words that don't quite mean to English speakers what I think they meant to the Japanese dev team.
You can get what they're trying to go for, but it's a more minor example of the same thing that happened with the main campaign, where it's just like you just kind of analyze it a little bit.
It's just because as soon as they throw the giant word sensual and sexuality on screen, referring to planes
in a plane game, it's like
they just lose me. I'm like, what? It's a lot of fun, but it's very ridiculous. And they do it like 3 times of like this AI going back and forth. And he's like, "You need to be more sensuous, Alex." What is going on? It was great. It's a wild experience. But yeah, these missions are great. They're some of the best in the game.
So good.
They're difficult, lengthy, and memorable. Which
Yeah,
I think the big three for the Ace Combat missions, and not like super lengthy, but they're timed well enough that you're gonna remember what you're doing, and you're doing a lot of
definitely.
different
Yeah.
things. And then of course you have that final showdown with the Alicorn where you gotta
Oh,
you have 20 seconds to
yes.
fly through exploding minefields in the air and shoot the base of their giant cannon to make it
Before it fires the
blow up.
nuke. It's and also this is at the point where the submarine is already sinking.
Oh
You've
yeah, no, they're
on
going
that
down.
exactly. You've already won that part, but he is literally using the angle of the submarine sinking to just shoot a nuke anywhere. Just
Just
get it out. It's people are gonna die. The message is gonna just get it out.
just get it out there, blow something up.
Oh my god.
So yeah, you just got to stop him from blowing something up, and that 20-second bit is hard because
Yeah.
you got to get it
Really
like
hard.
you have to be at such a perfect angle to
Yeah.
get that cannon in the right way. And it's not like you hit it with one missile and you're done. No, you gotta like unload into that thing. You need to
Everything.
everything you gotta go into the base of that cannon. And see, Brett, the problem I had is I kept trying to do the thing. I saw the top of the submarine, right? I'm like,
You were
that you
tricked.
gotta fly through that, right? You have to fly through that. So I like 4 times tried to blow it up by flying through that like submarine carrier hangar, and learned only after I'd blown it up just going the other way that if you do that, you can't hit it.
Yeah.
You can't hit the
No.
thing because it's too low. It's covered by armor. You have to go from the front.
Yeah.
So
I,
don't make the same mistake I did.
it's really cool. Don't do it.
It
I think
looked
there's a
very
way to
cool.
like if you angle like a bomb or something to like go around it a little bit, you can do it from the inside, but that's like
It's super
that's
hard.
yeah, that's if you're a real that's if
Yeah,
you're a real drone.
real human drone. All right, so I think closing thoughts on Ace Combat 7 as a whole. Heavily recommend playing it if you haven't.
Yeah.
It's on Game Pass, at least on
On
console. I don't know if it's on PC.
I think it is. I'm pretty sure it came recently, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I
I'm
have
actually gonna
not.
open it real quick.
I've owned the PC version for a while, so I haven't checked the PC version of Game Pass for it. I don't believe it is, but I know it is on the Xbox version of Game Pass, so you can definitely play
Yes.
it there. Um, it also goes on sale very frequently for relatively cheap. It's a 2-year-old
Yep.
game at this point. DLC is also often on sale, so wholly recommend picking up it with the DLC because the DLC missions are phenomenal. Just make sure
Yeah.
you finish the game first because they are
Yeah.
hard. They are not
Yeah,
easy.
this was my game of the year for 2019 when it came out. It's so good, so good.
It was up there for me. I don't think it would be in because I played it in 2020 and in
Yeah,
2021, so it obviously wasn't competing in 2019 for me. It would have been up there though. It's I don't think it would have beaten out because I think there was I think Persona 5 or something like that came out,
I probably
or Royal came out in 2019 that I had to shove it to that. But really good game. Definitely recommend playing it. So Brett, there are 2 plane games.
Yes.
There's 2 whole plane games in this
2
episode,
whole plane games.
which means we're gonna talk about Project Wingman now.
Woo!
I'm so excited. So much hype. So we've done the Ace Combat talk, and a lot of what we've said can apply to Project Wingman as well.
Yes.
But to set expectations, Project Wingman is made by like 3 people total, 4.
One of them is the composer.
Yeah,
Yes.
very small
All
team.
the voice actors are volunteers.
Yep,
Yeah.
it's phenomenal.
Yeah.
I want to get that out of the way first because Project Wingman is the kind of game that you play through, and it released at like $25, I think, and is consistently at like 15 to 20. Made by this small team of 3 people over the course of like 9 years or something ridiculous like
really
that.
long time.
It's been a long time coming.
Much like 7, people thought this game would not come out, but for completely different reasons that there was just at that point like one guy making it.
Because this was in development a long time before we knew 7 existed.
Yes, this was on
yeah.
itch for a while. I remember.
Because the big thing with this is that like this was started development in that long period of time where like we just had no announcements for anything new Ace Combat related coming, so there was this big void of flight arcade games like this. So someone was like, "Hey, I'm gonna make a game and it's gonna be really good, and it came out being better than really good.
Yeah.
um, Project Wingman is in contention for my game of the year for this year, which is
Yeah,
impressive because I play a lot of video games, and there are some really good things that have come out this year. But Project Wingman is like one of the most impressive single team efforts I have ever seen. Like,
for sure.
it is such an amazing debut game that I sincerely hope they're coming out with more stuff like this soon, because not
They
soon,
have
but
to.
this, and it was a huge success. Like Project Wingman, I think has they've said exceeded expectations multiple times with how
It's yeah.
well it's done.
I think they got top top selling game for like the day after it came out or something on Steam.
Yeah, which for an
Just
indie like
just for
this is
yeah,
ridiculous.
like just for one day, but for like an indie plain game that's been in development for like 9 years, that is magic. That is a miracle.
Yeah, it's not definitely not anywhere near like Stardew Valley or Minecraft levels of success, but they did
Yeah,
well. The game has nothing but glowing reviews. Like, you will be hard pressed to find legitimate complaints about this game because
it's yeah,
it is so solidly made. Because I think this is one of those scenarios where what I said earlier about like Ace Combat 7 and Project Wingman are the same kind of games, but executed very differently, which means they coexist in a way that I think people were worried it wouldn't. Project
yeah.
Wingman does not feel like playing Ace Combat 7. It feels far more arcadey. A good example of how to set the stage is in Ace Combat 7, you get like 60 to 90 missiles, depending on the
At
plane,
most.
at most. Project Wingman, you start with like 190.
Yeah, on the beginner plane,
On the
and you can
early
carry like
screen.
4 different kinds of
You
weapons.
have 3 special weapons, and occasionally like a 4th extra choice of thing.
Yeah.
And the best innovation in any game ever is the AOA limiter, which is
Oh my
drifting planes.
god.
It is a button press to drift your plane in inhuman ways,
Any
uh,
direction.
any direction, any way you want. You might crash it into whatever you're going at, because drifting planes is difficult, but it is
But it's worth it.
incredibly fun. Um, and the flares are no longer limited; they are infinite use on a cooldown, which is a great
Yes.
change for if you don't want to do that. You have if you get like motion sick or something, which
Mhm.
is totally something that can happen
Oh
with a game like this, especially with the AOA limiter throwing your camera in everyone which direction, which is great if you can handle it. But I know plenty of people that would
oh
probably
yeah.
blow chunks. So you have options to not do that if you don't want to do that, and you can just play with flares, which are also great. Uh, it makes so many gameplay decisions that I think moment to moment, Project Wingman is like some of the most fun
Oh yeah.
I've had with anything. Like, I want to hear your impressions from like going in, Brett, because I know you had kind of known about this game for a while.
Yeah. I uh I found out about it when like Oni Plays was doing like an itch.io like random games like let's just play all this crap and make fun of it, and they played it for like 5 minutes and they were like, this is really hard, but it looks really pretty. We'll come back to this someday. And of course, I'll never come back to
Oh
it. But I
yeah,
was like,
obviously
that
not.
looks really cool, huh? And then, like, 2.5 years later, it's just like, oh my God, it came out and it's like, I can buy it for money and it feels like it's worth money. That's incredible. Um, but yeah, I was going in just kind of being like, this'll be cute. Like, it'll be a nice, like, fun fan made time, and I'll if it works, I'll have fun with it. It's like $20, whatever, that's fine. I was not expecting like I a masterpiece, honestly. Like it is a near perfect experience. It is so good. I think they made like a right choice of having the flight model be more arcadey, like the older Ace Combat games. Because then yeah, they can double down on like all the crazy stuff, like
Yeah,
the AOA limiter. They really did just go full arcade, and it's insane. I don't know how one man could fit so many missiles on a screen.
but it's
Like
so good.
yeah.
Yeah, this subscribes to like what I would like to call the Earth Defense Force methodology of looks, which is it may not look amazing on a still frame, But as soon as things start moving, you realize you've
Oh yeah.
gotten like up to like 100 missiles at a time going in different directions,
Yeah.
all over the screen. There are lights everywhere. Everything's like looks great in motion.
It's so
Um,
beautiful.
it's such like I think Ace Combat 7 on a technical level is obviously a lot prettier, but
Definitely, yeah.
I far prefer the look of Project Wingman to
Exactly.
7
Exactly.
because of how well executed it is. They know
Yeah.
exactly what they needed to do to make it this kind of game. Like,
Yeah.
it's so impressive. And not even to mention, we haven't even talked about the story yet.
That's exactly, which the
Highlight.
message is like, a little less big brain than 7, but the storytelling is just incredible compared
Yeah,
to
the
7.
storytelling is amazing, especially considering like Ace Combat 7's got a lot of cutscenes. You know the one thing that Project Wingman doesn't have? Cutscenes.
It has maybe one, and it's just a still image
Because you can play
for
the
like a
entire
minute.
game in VR. So
Yes.
it's built into it that there are no cutscenes because those would interrupt the flow of VR.
Hmm.
So all of the story is told through the mission briefings and the launches in the actual ship or the plane to plane chatter and whatnot. And I also think like this is probably one of the scenarios where I think we probably won't say the ending specifically
Yes.
because we want people to play this game.
More than still play Ace Combat 7,
But Ace
but
Combat
play
7,
Project Wingman
people
more.
know about Ace Combat 7. Like
It's
Ace
older,
Combat's
yeah.
a franchise people know about. Even if they haven't played it, it's a name that most people will recognize if they play a lot of games,
Yeah,
at
yeah.
least passively. Project Wingman is one of those rare scenarios of a game that is like so immediately good
Yeah.
on every forefront that I think it's one of those rare indie things where like I just want more of these because they're amazing.
Hmm.
And you can tell there's so much heart and passion that went into the creation of this game. From things like the mission where Showdown plays, and
Oh.
that's one of the other things. As soon as I can start pulling out the names of tracks of a game, that's the
Exactly.
example of when the soundtrack has hit the point of just incredible. So like Ace Combat 7's music is also phenomenal, but it tends to stay in the background. Like it tends to stay as like the soundtrack you would expect to like a Mission Impossible, right?
It's yeah, most of the time. Most
Most
of
of
the
the time,
time.
there's still some bombastic stuff, but
Yeah.
Project Wingman was just like, nah,
It's
we're
yeah.
going insane the entire time through. And there are a number of tracks that are crazy. There's the squad you go up against a couple of times, Crimson, has straight up Castlevania music.
Yeah, near even.
Yeah, near
Like,
Castlevania style stuff, and it's
it's
incredible
wild.
because they come into the game for the first time, and this does the awesome thing of they as soon as this squadron appears, they're like, dude, get out, like
You
don't
can't
fight
handle
them,
them.
and your mission briefing just changes to escape.
It's yeah, in big letters on the screen.
Yeah,
Just get out. And they
and part
show
of
up and
the
they have like
thing
20 health bars, and it's like, okay, I believe you. I'm getting out of here.
and you can like try to fight them if you want to.
If you're insane.
Yeah, you can try in your dinky little starter plane. Maybe you'll do something, but the thing that I think really also hammers it in is Project Wingman doesn't have checkpoints, so it's
Yes.
designed a little bit differently than Ace Combat 7 in that most of the missions are gonna be 15 to 20 minutes, go blow up everything. Like
Yeah.
there's a little less subtlety in the mission design of Project Wingman, which is not a bad thing.
Not at all,
It's just a
no.
different experience. So it's
Yeah.
more along the lines of like you know what to expect when you start a Project Wingman mission. It's going to be blow everything up, and you have plenty of tools to do that. But all the missions eventually become blow everything up, which is still great fun. And it also means that when you get that giant escape warning on your screen, you're like, I should probably get out of here so I don't have to replay this.
Exactly. Yeah. You said like 20, 30 minutes, but like these missions are really hard. And if
Yeah.
you like mess up, you're gonna be doing like the volcano mission for like hours.
Yeah, so
it is
and
hard.
Project Wingman has just like Ace Combat 7 an unlockable difficulty. So you start
Yes.
out with easy, normal, and hard. I played most of the missions on hard. I think the volcano mission I had to drop it down. because I was just
Yeah,
like,
that
I
makes
want to be
sense.
able to finish the game before we do this episode.
Exactly.
So I dropped it down for that. But most of the game I played on hard, including like the final boss and everything, um, which was phenomenal. Like it's super well balanced in that it's hard, but it's totally doable. Mercenary, on the other hand, I can't.
It's legendary basically at
Brett
that
saw me
point.
attempt the final boss on Mercenary, and I could not. I was fighting him for 20 minutes. I used all of my missiles and got
On
one
one
quarter
attempt. Yeah.
through the way of his health.
Got it.
So that one's a little tough. But yeah, there's plenty of difficulty scaling in that game, and it's also got a conquest mode. It has
Yes.
a whole separate pseudo roguelike. Basically, what to expect is a Battlefront 2, the original Battlefront 2, had Galactic Conquest, where you hired a bunch of planes and soldiers and went around conquering planets. That's basically what this is you conquer Calradia and do a bunch of stuff. It's fun, but it doesn't have as much sticking power as a campaign, I think, up for
It's
clear
definitely not.
reasons. But yeah, Wingman's story is also phenomenal, like
And yeah,
in the best way.
it's like it's and they get you too because it starts pretty simple. Like it starts like you are the classic like band of mercenaries. Oh, a war is starting. Was perfect. Let's make some quick bucks. Get some more hatches on the side of our ships. Get some a better name for us out there. Let's go. It's just going to be like all the other wars. It'll be fine. Um, and then things get more serious. And then things happen that literally like hurt your heart to
Yep.
watch when like they start bringing like explosives that are made out of a material that make the tectonic plates mad. It's like, and they just unleash suffering compared to the suffering that is like threatened in Ace Combat 7. Like the 5-10 million people, you just watch like
It
forests
happens.
burn. It's horrible. And it does not feel good, and they do
You
not
play
want it to
two
feel
missions in
good.
the same area, and the first go around, it's all nice and pretty. The second go around, it's
Yeah.
a giant volcano.
It's yeah, and is gleaming orange and burnt and
Yeah, the
horrible.
sky's full of ash. It's bonkers. There's
It's
some
insane.
being unbound from reality in the visual direction for this game is like the best decision that team made. Of
Definitely,
like
yeah.
the biggest complaint people had when the game launched was that it's too orange.
That's right.
Because
Because it was
originally
too
it was
orange.
there were so many levels that had a lot of orange, and like it was very saturated, so it could be very
Mhm.
orange. They toned it down. It's still very orange, but
Extremely
it looks
orange.
great. Like the missions all have this very unique aesthetic and way
Yeah.
they play, and like the trails that come off of the big ships flying
Oh,
are just add a lot. It has a very like animeified look compared
yeah,
to Ace Combat 7, but for a video game, I think that's a better thing. It's a little bit
for sure.
more
Yeah.
fantastical, which works. We haven't talked about the characters, Brett.
I haven't talked about the characters.
There's so many.
And that's the thing is there's so many in Wingman and there's so many in Seven, but the many that are in Wingman I think are just characterized like oodles better than the ones in Seven, which
Yeah.
has more characters in it than like your typical Ace Combat game. But you have your little squadron. You have I was about to say Crimson. I know I can't remember Monarch. I
Yeah,
was about to
Hitman
wipe
Squadron
my brain.
with Monarch is the Hitman 1.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. Hitman Squadron, and you play as Monarch, and you have two wingmen. You have uh I just I keep wanting to say Prez, so I'm just gonna say you finally have the guy in the back seat that's in all the other plane games that just doesn't ever say anything or get talking spoken to at all.
Yeah, your
Um
weapons officer.
It's yeah. Finally, she, which I thought was cool, that they
Yeah.
made it a girl, has a character, and her name is Prez, and she is awesome, and she constantly has like back and forth things to say. It's amazing.
Yeah, I
Um,
think that's like one of the best things of like you have this side character that's not even not a pilot, not doing anything too important, but she's a great character because to the degree where people you only get her if you fly a 2-seater plane.
Yes.
And there aren't that many in Wingman, which is like my one issue is there's not like a late game 2-seater, which I think they've said they're working on adding one.
So, yeah.
But she's only in those. So you have to take a plane that might be like a handicap, depending on where you are in the game, to hear her dialogue. And she's got unique dialogue all the way through the final mission.
Yeah.
Like all the way through. So it's a great like challenge run to do if you want to get the full Prez experience.
Which is necessary to be, a true gamer.
a true
ace
Wingman gamer. Yeah. Then you have your other squad members, Diplomat and Comic, that are also great. And I think you can clearly tell here, we're remembering the names.
Mm-hmm.
Clear difference from 7 of like, I remember the name of almost every character down to like Galaxy or AWACS. Is your AWACS for the entire game. So you get a lot more knowledge about him. Like he's a former DJ. So there's tons of cool little stuff in the game that like just characterizes everyone. You've got Kaiser, who's like your military captain. You learn of like Mother Goose Squadron, and you've got the Star or something Squadron.
Mother Goose is from Ace Combat.
Oh yeah, I know.
Nice try.
No, there's Mother Goose in Wingman too. One of the squadrons is Mother Goose. They're the other mercenary squad that.
Oh, that's right. It's something else. It's something else. Goose. We'll just call it Mother Goose for now. I'll pretend you're right.
Yeah, Mother Goose in 7 is like the first squadron you meet, and you meet them a few more times because they're mercenaries, so you like run into each other.
Yes.
It's great because there's recurring characters.
It's incredible.
There's so much like fun in just those little interactions, especially because like your first interaction with Mother Goose is they're on the opposite side, but they got there after you'd already destroyed their like protection target, so you just radio them and are like, hey, your target's already gone, like you guys want to just turn around, and they're like, yeah, sure.
They're just like, oh well, yeah, that's fine, I guess.
They're like, we're going to Calradia because there's a lot of money to be made there, which is great. Like there's a lot of setup of like why you're going to this destination, what's happening, and you learn a lot about like your individual characters. There's a moment, and this is like as spoilery as I think I'll get, of like about a third into the game, you have a like crazy research lady who for some reason knows the names of some of your characters and like starts to belt them out, and at that moment you're like, what? Because they make a point of explaining why you don't refer to each other by your actual names, is so people don't hear them on radio. They go like, yeah, we don't want people knowing who we are because we're mercenaries. We might get like assassinated.
Yep.
Which is actually explained, which is great. Like there's all these little things that they thought about that you wouldn't. I don't think are questions people would have asked, but it's great to have answers.
Definitely.
Either way. So yeah, there's tons of really cool stuff.
I think a cool thing with all like those details is that there is like a little database that you can see for like every single character and every single like ace that you fight against or whatever. But you don't need to read any of that.
Yeah.
Like you get those details, most of them just from the game, and then if you missed them or just want to have it in another format, the database is there also. Which I like that amount of detail is I love it so much. Like that detailed storytelling is, why these like really specific kinds of games like thrive. Like that is it's the Metal Gear in the skies that people talk about in legends when they refer to Ace Combat.
Yeah, absolutely. It just like I think Project Wingman's biggest asset is that it knows what it is to a degree that so few games do. Of like, it knows it's a video game, so it's trying to achieve everything it can in that framework of being a video game, and in a niche like flight arcade game, of which there are like 2 franchises. There is Ace Combat and Tom Clancy's Hawks are its only competition.
One of which does not exist anymore.
One of which isn't real anymore. Hey, we don't know. Maybe they're going to pull out Tom Clancy's Hawks 3 behind our backs.
Don't do it. Don't give them ideas. Don't do it.
I'll play more flight sims if they have, or more flight arcade games if they got them. So, yeah, I think Wingman just is such a rare case of a game executing on every promise that it had. Especially because I believe the game was crowdfunded, at least partly.
I think so. Yeah.
And it was a long time ago, so I'll fact check while we're talking of if it was. But it's just so rare to see a project like this actually come out and be what it was promised to be.
Yeah.
Especially with a small team like this.
It took a long time, but yeah, it's just because like for a while that one guy just wanted to be one guy, and I think at some point he just realized like I have to give in. There's got to be someone else here.
Yeah, Project Wingman was kickstarted a long time ago. This is like the old Kickstarter page for about 100,000 Australian dollars. So not even a huge, not even a super large amount of money. But yeah, it was from like 2,500 people a long time ago. It had a $35,000 goal, so it still like crushed its Kickstarting goal. But it was kickstarted a long time ago.
Yeah.
And I think it definitely picked up some investors because it was published by Humble. So
yeah,
Humble Bundle picked it up at some point and probably had a bit of an influx of something into it to keep the team going. But yeah, I'm super glad it came out because it's great. There are tons of different planes, Brett, that are all legally distinct versions.
Yes. They are nothing like planes in real life. I don't know what you're talking about.
It's not the F-14. It's the F/D-14.
Yeah. Because, like, you spend practically more time going through all the different logos of military plane factories at the beginning of an Ace Combat game than you do playing the game practically, because there's so many. And then a Wingman, it's just 3 guys, so they can't afford that. So they just got to mix the letters up and just make it look a little bit different, and it's fine.
It's good enough.
It's good enough.
There are some great original designs in Wingman too.
Yes.
It's just so much creativity behind every facet of the game.
One of which is just pretty much like you just make it red and it's a Jedi Starfighter pretty much.
Make it red and it's 3 times faster.
Well, that goes without saying, of course. But yeah.
Yeah, I do want to say about the conquest mode, which I've gone back and forth on playing. It is a good, if you are looking for something like the Battlefront 2 Galactic Conquest mode. Yeah. This is probably as close as you're gonna get with modern day stuff, aside from like Mountain Blade. This is about as close as I've gotten to that in like a nice arcade format that's not basically grand strategy levels of complexity.
Yeah,
which is great. It's especially because it's in the same game as this amazing campaign. So this is one of the like biggest value games I think you can get out there.
I'd maybe not to the same degree as Hollow Knight, but I'd put it up there with like Hollow Knight for like games like compared to the amount of like stuff you get in the game for how much you pay.
There's
like,
tons of replayability.
Yeah,
and
it's another case. It's another case where like the final plane costs millions more in monies than you could possibly have by the end of your first playthrough. So you gotta get it. You gotta get the railgun shooting plane with, I think it's 32 missiles at a time that come out.
It's a lot. It's
it's a blinding amount of missiles, and it's amazing.
That just covers your screen in streaks because of the amount of missiles happening, which is wonderful.
It's so cathartic.
Yeah, I think like that's the thing with Wingman. Like we have nothing negative to say about it
at all.
Whereas Ace Combat 7, we can go on for 20 minutes about some small issues. Wingman just doesn't really have those. And like the machine gun thing I was talking about with 7, in Wingman, the machine guns are maybe a little bit overpowered, but it's just really fun. It's really fun to run around with the explosive gun pods and your slow frogfoot plane with Prez and just try to blow everything up with these very slow but extremely heavy hitting gun pods. which is tons of fun. It's just something it supports a lot more varied play styles than I think Ace Combat 7 does, because you
Definitely,
have
yeah.
a lot of options and you all of them work. That's the big
Yeah.
thing. Although
That's
the high velocity missiles are terrible, but
yeah,
you
they're
know,
not really
it's fine.
they're not the most useful, but that's like the biggest difference between like the overarching gameplay is that Ace Combat 7 is definitely like compared to Wingman more of a puzzle game, and Wingman is just like you have 20 different ways to blow everything up and you can do it any way you want. There's some ways that might be harder, but there's no way that's going to make it impossible.
Yeah.
And there's just some ways that might be more difficult than other ones.
Like one thing I do particularly like about Wingman that Ace Combat 7 didn't really do is Combat 7. You've got this fight against the Arsenal Bird, which is like a great boss encounter in a fight game like this. But you don't have anything like between a regular plane and an Arsenal Bird,
Yeah.
which is like that stepping stone of like you're never fighting something like a VTOL or like a crazy gunship like you do in a lot of other Ace Combat games. But in Wingman, there's tons. There's like a ton of like variant ships that are like different sizes of their every faction. In like the second mission, you're fighting these large gunships, and you have to like blow off their individual weaponry, and then the entire ship will go down. You've got like different sized naval fleets that happen. Just a lot more like variety in the size of things you're fighting, which I think is great.
Yeah.
Particularly in the case of those like aerial ships, because they're visually really cool. They have this cool like particle effect coming off of them because they use these special engines that the game explains. And you have them on your side too. You'll find like you have someone on your side. You got to protect one, and you got to go blow up like three others. So that variation is great, and it's like not just that one. It's like another one that's another size up of being even heavier,
Yeah, yeah.
uh, which is a lot of fun to fight. So there's a lot of that variation in what you're doing.
You got the land ships that are literally just trapezoids that are covered in AA
Yep.
guns. Just there's just like 20 AA guns in one little rectangle.
Gigantic like Goliath tanks
It's
that just go
yeah,
across with just tons of guns coming off the side.
super cool.
Yeah, it's just a great set of like things to fight. Where I think that's like the one major bit where Ace Combat 7 is kind of lacking, because they kept so strictly to kind of pseudo real world technology.
Yeah.
Um, where those kind of like mid-sized things are maybe not the best use of money. Um, but they're a lot of fun to fight because they give you more variation, which is great.
Yeah.
They function like captains in the Dynasty Warrior games. Of like you have like that one enemy that's a little bit stronger, you got to
That
take
makes
down.
sense, yeah.
Just a lot of fun, especially when you like shoot through them with a railgun and the entire thing just blows up, and then they
It's
just start
yeah.
like going down over the course of like a minute to hit
Yep.
the ground in this big
And
explosion.
you get the because like every single thing you destroy, the point thing comes up on the side of the screen to tell you how many
Yep.
points you got. But if you blow the entire 27 AA gun rectangle up at the same time, half of your screen is just
String of
covered
them.
in points, and it's like, oh god, it's so good.
Yep, pure dopamine.
Ugh,
All
that's
right,
what the whole game is. Honestly, it's just pure dopamine.
absolutely. Again, wholeheartedly recommend Project Wingman and Ace Combat
Yeah,
7. But if you've got to pick one of the two, I think I would say lean towards Project Wingman.
yeah,
Just
I
because I
agree.
think more people will enjoy Wingman as well, of it not quite having that flight sim esque handling of certain like elements of like the wind pressure and whatnot aren't quite as severe, which makes it easier
Definitely.
to approach. But yeah, super fun game. It's on like most PC platforms, so definitely recommend picking it up. All right, Brett, any closing thoughts on these games?
Uh, well, I mean, I just think more people should play them because I mean, more people already are than have before, and I think you could give Wingman a pretty big thumbs up in that regard in terms of getting more people into the genre. But like, I don't know. They're super niche, but they're as we've found out, very very good, and a lot of passion and heart goes into them to tell some pretty awesome stories and to blow up some pretty cool big things in the sky.
Look, I'm not gonna spoil the ending of Wingman, but I gotta give a shout out to games that have secret endings that are achievable on like the hardest difficulty on the final boss. You do that mission, you get some extra voiceover during the credit sequence of like things that are happening, which is great.
Super cool.
And yeah, I did forget to say, like, Wingman has some great vistas of cities, which I think it handles better than Ace Combat does, in that these cities are a little bit more exaggerated. They're very tall.
Yes.
They're very like futuristic in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And even like the one that is destroyed, you're flying through it and you can like do tricks between the buildings because they're tall enough for you to do that comfortably. And those they're just visually super unique. So I think those levels particularly stand out a lot in Wingman because of how unique they are.
Definitely.
Compared to 7. Like 7 has like cityscape that looks pretty close to what you would expect of modern day like Tokyo or Boston or something like that, just like a coastal city. Whereas Project Wingman City is like, this would not exist.
It's borderline Coruscant at that point.
It's got like a giant wall with a bunch of lasers coming off of it. I'm like, huh? Yeah, there's a lot of fun in those environments that I think Wingman just really excels with. So.
For sure, yeah.
With that, Brett, we have succeeded in doing our own games club. The experience, I hope, has been enlightening.
Definitely 2 games in one.
a 2-for-1 special, because we didn't have to debate for 30 minutes on if certain decisions The Last of Us 2 made were good.
Oh, God. Isn't it nice to have an easy game to talk about?
Isn't it nice to have games that we like?
It's just games that are hard to think of something bad to say, so you just don't really have anything to say.
That's why the Cyberpunk one's been delayed, because we all are just kind of like, do we really want to talk about that game?
Yeah, it's been delayed just as much as the game.
It's been delayed until the game is in the state that it should have been in when it launched. But that is a separate Games Club episode. So for now, Brett, we've done it. Unless you've got closing words, give the adoring audience your speech.
Guns, guns, guns.
There it is.
And that's it. It was going to happen once.
Guns, guns, guns.
The very end.
We had to do it. Yeah. So wonderful games, both of them. Play Project Wingman. And then, if you have the time, play Ace Combat 7. So, with that, we're closing out. We hope you come back to watch the actual podcast on Tuesdays at 7 a.m. YouTube, Anchor, any podcast platform of your choice. Listen, watch, do it.
It gets smoother every time.
just do it. Just watch the show.
Oh my God.